Have you ever been to a sexual health clinic? Bit awkward, isn't it? You try to be inconspicuous. Study the posters on the wall saying things like, HPV? Not for me. Be gone with gonorrhea. Wrap it before you tap it. I had something else to worry about. The first time I went to the clinic, I was with my dad. Not a standard father-child outing, but there I was, hoping that the nurse wouldn't pick up on my embarrassment or deep, profound shame. She called my name. 10 minutes later, I walked out with a pack of contraceptives and my dad, who, if he felt relief, kept it hidden. The nurse didn't even ask who I was having sexual activity with. I was 13 years old. I wonder how many of you know what it's like to live every day of your childhood with a terrible secret, one which you try to push away, but it still visits you at night. It taints every interaction you have. You could be talking to someone, but only half listening to them as you imagine how their face would change if they knew, if they saw. I had such a secret, and the hardest part about it was I felt sure that I deserved it. In the UK, the NSPCC estimates that 1 in 20 children are sexually abused. That's about 1 child in every classroom. So the odds are that some of you know someone who is being abused today. Does someone come to mind? I didn't tell anyone until I was 15. By that time, I'd been abused regularly for nearly 9 years. By the time I reached puberty, my level of shame was so deep that it felt like part of me, like part of my DNA, especially as the abuser shared so much of it with me. It was my father, of course. According to the Crime Survey of England and Wales in 2019, 5% of child victims were abused by their fathers, a further 6% by their stepfathers, and a further 22% by family members not specified. My experience of keeping the secret isn't unique. Most survivors don't tell anyone for years or even decades. I cannot emphasize enough just how strong that sense of personal responsibility is. If abuse is physically forced, then the child feels that they allowed it to happen and should have fought back. And if the abuse is not physically forced, then they still have that sense of having allowed it to happen. Sometimes the child's body has a normal, natural sexual response to the abuse, and then they go through their lives feeling as though their body betrayed them. I want you to understand how much of a no-win scenario that is. Every survivor has something that they think makes it their fault. I went through the whole police investigation. I testified at my father's trial. I told them everything, except for one little thing that I left out. It was a small, contextual detail that I thought made my case exceptionally shameful. You see, the first time I was abused, I asked for it. I knew from a young age that my body felt tingly and strange when touched in certain places, and I thought it was exciting. So one day, I asked him to touch me in the places where it tingled, and that's how the abuse started. This is exactly the kind of barrier that could be preventing a child from telling you. I held on to this notion that I asked for it for so many years afterwards. How could it be not my fault if I asked for it? I thought I was the first child in the history of humanity to ask an adult to look at or touch them down there. It turns out that kids say these sorts of things all the time. Even my mum shared a story with me about how my brother once jumped up and down in the bath going, "Mummy, Mummy, look at my willy, it's moving." Of course it's the adult's responsibility to set boundaries, not the child's fault for being curious. The abuser does not want to be found out, so they will say anything to keep that child silent. Things like, "You made me do it. It's your fault for being too sexy. And if you tell anyone, it'll incriminate us both." My father made so many threats that I would go to prison, that my mum would abandon me and return to India, that he would take his own life. I idolized him as a little girl, and I still remember how that felt. I didn't want anything bad to happen. I didn't want to destroy my family or give my mum another reason to drink. At the time, I thought I gave no indication of what was happening, but it turns out there were several opportunities where an adult might have helped me to tell someone sooner. My school teacher from year 6 contacted me after I went public in the media to tell me there was one occasion where she thought something like that might be going on. She said, "Siobhan, I think you almost came to telling me once. You'd been acting strangely on a Friday afternoon. I asked if anything was wrong, and you said you were going home to your father for the weekend and you didn't want to go. You said, I can't tell you why. I can't tell you anyone. I thought something might be wrong, but you kept repeating, I can't tell anyone." And let's not forget that day at the clinic. A sexual health nurse and a teacher both had the opportunity to dig deeper, but they didn't. I guess they didn't know how to broach the issue, but I needed them to try. There was something else in my teacher's message. She said, "Back then there was no referral system and I felt it was beyond my jurisdiction to push you further." I don't know why I'm making her sound like Scooby-Doo, but that's just the way it is right now. It's a serious topic. Putting it together, the child is visibly distressed about a caregiver. The child doesn't want to go home. The child is acting strangely. You will never get a better opportunity than that, but nothing was done about it. And if it wasn't her jurisdiction, whose jurisdiction was it? Okay, well, that was back in 2000. It's all different. It's all better now, right? Sadly not. In England, there is no legal duty to report suspected or known child abuse to a local authority, except for FGM. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking that can't be right. Didn't I go to a safeguarding training one time? Doesn't it clearly state in the latest version of Working Together to Safeguard Children that I must report any safeguarding concerns? Yes, it does say that. But those documents are just guidelines. They have no legal force whatsoever. There is no legal duty to report child abuse to a local authority contained in any statute in English law. I defy you to find it. It simply does not exist. Well-meaning professionals like you are often shocked to learn that our system is full of could, should, and would, but no must. The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse looked at this problem a few years ago. They consulted with academics and policymakers and survivors, including me. They ended up recommending that we introduce mandatory reporting here. Great. But the version that the government responded with falls short of what we need. It contains a clause saying that you don't need to refer if somebody else is going to refer. Well, since there's no way of knowing if somebody else was just about to pass that message on, it will still be easy for individuals and institutions to turn a blind eye. There's another clause in the government legislation, as it's proposed, that I find extraordinary, which is that you don't need to make a referral if you believe that doing so would not be in the child's best interests. It's hard for me to imagine any scenario that fits this criterion, because if a child is being abused and you suspect it and you pass that referral on, then the abuse can be stopped. And that, in my view, is always in the child's best interests. Critics say that mandatory reporting would cause professionals to overwhelm the system by going around frantically reporting everything out of a fear of punishment, leading to an expensive and inefficient system. But evidence from other countries shows that this isn't what happens. In 2016, a study in Australia looked at how the numbers of both referrals and investigations changed after they brought in mandatory reporting. And yes, the number of referrals did go up, but it didn't overwhelm the agency's capacity to respond. And what they also found was that the number of investigations tripled, leading to many more cases of sexual abuse coming to light sooner than they otherwise would have done. I don't know how much it would cost to bring in mandatory reporting here, but I do know that the Home Office estimates that child sexual abuse costs society over £10 billion per year in criminal justice, healthcare, loss of employment, and other detriments. For context, that's about 10 times as much as homelessness. So it strikes me that bringing in a real legal duty to report would be money well spent. Since we can't rely on the law to compel us to do what we ought to do anyway, it's even more important that you overcome your internal barriers, which can sound like, what if I get it wrong? What if I make the situation worse? What if I get in trouble? Remember, it's better to be wrong about a suspicion than wrong to ignore one. You don't want to be in my teacher's position. What does it mean then to have the conversation? What could my teacher have done differently? She could have started with some general open-ended questions. Siobhan, I've noticed you seem a bit unhappy. Is there anything going on for you? Is there anything at home? Is there anything on your mind? How are you feeling? She did ask if anything was wrong, but that's as far as she went, and it wasn't far enough. Children who are being sexually abused need 3 things. Firstly, they need reassurance. Siobhan, I've noticed you seem a little bit unhappy. Is there anything wrong? You are not in trouble. I'm here to help you with anything that you might be going through. Secondly, the child needs preemptive understanding. That is, for someone to speak to the barriers that are keeping them silent without them needing to put a name to the exact nature of the problem just yet, keeping in mind that many children don't understand that they're being abused. This could sound like, if you're confused about anything, you don't need to handle it alone. I'm not here to judge, I'm here to help. Everyone feels embarrassed or even ashamed sometimes, but it can really help to tell someone what you're going through. Perhaps you could share some experiences from your own life when you felt embarrassed or afraid. Finally, the child needs an acknowledgement that whatever the thing is, it's clearly hard to talk about and it might be a secret. My teacher could have said, Siobhan, listen, you don't need to keep painful secrets, even if someone else has told you that you should. You mentioned that you didn't want to go home to your father. Help me to understand why that is, and we'll figure it out together. Whew, if only. Those barriers would have spoken, would have addressed the reasons that I was keeping silent and connected with me in a way that nothing else had. General statements about abuse never being the child's fault are all good and well, but we need to go further than that. We need to address the dynamic that the abuser imposes upon the child by convincing them that it's their fault. Professionals could have spared me from years of abuse if they'd had the courage that I am now asking each and every one of you to have. What I'm asking is not easy. People who are in a position to receive a disclosure need special guidance on how to handle such an acutely sensitive situation. So I founded Beam Project to offer workshops that are designed and delivered only by people with direct experience of child sexual abuse who are no longer afraid to talk about it. Together, we speak on all the ways that abusers operate to keep us silent, to keep us blaming ourselves, and to keep everybody else oblivious. Our goal is to make this safety-critical conversation second nature so that the next time you have that worry or that suspicion, the shadow of a what if, you are ready to intervene instead of just telling yourselves that you're wrong. Let's create a culture within the NHS that allows children and adults to talk about having been sexually abused without being seen as too much or a bit weird or oversharing or whatever hat the stigma is wearing today. The taboo around this issue is highly problematic. It has real consequences for children who are being abused now. It is the hand over their mouth. Stops them from saying anything. So for those of you who do have a child in mind at this very moment, recognize that you have the opportunity to make a tremendous difference for them if they are carrying that terrible secret, as I was. We rely on children to tell us if they're being sexually abused, but they rely on us to make it safe for them to do so. Thank you.